first juror to show her face and the only non-white member of the all-female jury who decided to acquit George Zimmerman, became the second juror to speak publicly when she sat down with ABC's Good Morning America today. In the interview, juror B29, who said her first name was Maddie but didn't disclose her last name, said that she thought Zimmerman was guilty of killing 17-year-old Trayvon Martin.
My first vote was second-degree murder.
Second-degree murder.
In between that 9 hours, it was hard. A lot of us that wanted to find something bad, something that we could connect to the law. For myself, he's guilty because the evidence shows he's guilty. George Zimmerman got away with murder, but you can't get away from God. And at the end of the day, he's going to have a lot of questions and answers he has to deal with. The law couldn't prove it, but, you know, the world goes in circles.
It was on the second day of deliberations in which she realized there wasn't enough evidence to convict Zimmerman of murder.
As the law was read to me, if you have no proof that he killed them intentionally, you can't say he's guilty.
Did you want to step out at all? Did you want to
I was
quit?
the juror that was going to give him the hung jury.
You feel in your heart of hearts that you and the jury approached it and came with the decision, and you stand by that decision to this day?
I stand by the decision because of the law.
After the trial, Maddie said she continued to wrestle with her decision and that she had a hard time sleeping and eating, and that she owes Trayvon Martin's parents an apology.
I feel that I was forcibly included in Trayvon Martin's death. And as I carry him on my back, I'm hurting as much as Trayvon Martin's mom is. Because there's no way that any mother should feel that pain.
Joining me now, Michael Eric Dyson, MSNBC political analyst, professor at Georgetown University, who was testifying before the Congressional Black Caucus just yesterday with Trayvon Martin's father, Tracy Martin. Michael, my first question to you is, hearing this, does this make you feel better or worse about that verdict?
Yeah, that's a great question because there's an ambivalence there. On the one hand, you feel relief that somebody understood the human stakes in this matter and that they understood that the overwhelming evidence suggested that George Zimmerman be found guilty of manslaughter, at least, and second-degree murder, more probably. On the other hand, I feel bad because I can feel her pain that she felt forced by the law, handcuffed, if you will, into a decision that she truly didn't agree with. And of course, there's the wish that maybe she might have held out. Maybe she could have held out to say, this is wrong, we can't do this, we'll hang the jury, and we'll start clean again. And then thirdly, I feel bad, Chris, because I think the prosecution did such a horrible job of connecting for these jurors what the law allowed. The law didn't say he had to intentionally kill this person in order to be found guilty. Certainly of manslaughter, we know he killed him. That's a fact. People who don't intend to kill people who kill them can still be found guilty. So it's a muddling and a mangling of the law that is really at stake here as well.
My reaction to it was similar to yours, and what I thought was interesting was what I wanted to feel about that jury when the verdict came down was that they understood that something very wrong had happened that night, terrible, but that the law that the burden of proof was not met. But that was not at all what we heard from the first juror. The first juror's impressions made me feel like the jury was completely clueless. And so hearing this makes me think that there was a very different conscience in that room, and I was reminded of the statement that 4 of the jurors drafted in response to the first juror's interview with Anderson Cooper, in which they basically disowned her views. The opinions of juror B37 expressed on the Anderson Cooper show were her own. Serving on this jury has been a highly emotional and physically draining experience. The death of a teenager weighed heavily on our hearts, but in the end we did what the law required us to do. I was struck by how much her conscience seems completely weighed down by what happened.
It's burdened and seared. You can feel the pain. You can empathize with her. And she empathizes with Trayvon's mother. And I think we should empathize with the fact that this jury was given a set of directives from the prosecution that all but, to me, lost the case because they weren't willing to make explicit what their beliefs were. They didn't have a narrative. They didn't draw the lines between the dots for these jurors, and they were left on their own. They were unhinged and unmoored, so to speak, to mix metaphors, out there on the ocean of judicial deliberation.
The fascinating thing to me about this is, if you look, we found out the juror had 4 white women, 1 woman who was not white. Her ethnicity was undisclosed. We now know that she's of Puerto Rican descent.
Right.
What was fascinating is the crudest racial stereotyping of how these jurors would come down is now, it appears to me, coming out to be true, in the sense that we know that the first vote, there was 1 juror who voted for second-degree murder, and we now know that was the only non-white juror.
And we also know, therefore, what conclusion do we draw from that? Some will say, well, this is the racial divisions that are poisoning the well. No, it means that we have to have diversity on these juries, Chris, because without that, we won't have an alternative perspective that allows us to arrive at a clearly cogent and compelling explanation of the data that obviously is rooted in one's own racial experiences.
And it's a perfect microcosm of the reason that you need diversity, not just in a 6-person jury, but in the halls of Congress and in corporate America and in big media companies, whether it's this place or Fox News across the street. MSNBC political analyst Michael Eric Dyson, thank you.
Thank you, sir.